All right, welcome back to One True Podcast. Alongside me, as always, is John Werner, who was just primping himself a minute ago, making sure he looked good for our Zoom audience.
I had the alfalfa thing going for our older listeners.
It's the joys of working from home, I guess. And then joining us this week, our special guest is Jenni Carlson of the Oklahoman. Jenni, thanks for hopping on.
Good to be here. I would have been primping too, John, but we had a press conference to go to today, so I actually have my camera ready faced on today.
There you go.
Definitely have the advantage.
Jenni's been with the Oklahoman for this is football season. I love how we count in football seasons. Number 24 there at the Oklahoman. But you're a columnist. You cover a lot of different things, including the Thunder, correct? So.
Yep.
I mean, she's all over the place, but thanks for hopping on for sure. Let's dive in, guys. So, John, last week was kind of a surprise. Baylor hit the road. So last week, let's back up first of all. They go on the road. They win in impressive fashion against Texas Tech, 45-17. Certainly, we didn't see that coming. You and I both picked Tech to win.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But they hit the road for the second straight week this week when they go to Norman, little jaunt up 35. That game last week against Tech was certainly Baylor's most complete performance of the year. Offense, defense, special teams. Meanwhile, the Sooners are in the midst of probably a disappointing season in Sooner country. I mean, by their standards. And yet, to me, this feels like a really tough game to pick. I don't know who to take.
Yeah.
So how do you guys see it? Jenni, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think this is one of those close games. I mean, I haven't picked many blowouts this year in Big 12 play, guys. I mean, I don't know how your picks have gone. I think I picked OU Texas to be a pretty big blowout because of their backup quarterback situation. I just didn't like the way that was trending, and I was proven right. But, a week ago, I thought Oklahoma State and K-State, I know we're going to talk about Oklahoma State here in a little bit, but that was a blowout I did not see coming.
Agreed.
I thought I think I picked Baylor to win last week, but I definitely didn't have that kind of blowout. We just haven't seen many blowouts in the league this year. So right. I think this is a close game on Saturday between Baylor and OU. The thing that makes me go with Baylor is Oklahoma just hasn't shown this team hasn't shown its ability to beat the really top level teams in this conference. Beating Kansas, beating Iowa State, obviously good wins for a program that had been dying to get back in the win column, but still those teams are teams you would think are down at the bottom, bottom half of the league for sure. So I want them to prove it before I pick them. So I'm picking Baylor to win, I think by, 3-4 points, something close, but I still like Baylor to win this one.
Yeah, John, you do a picks column for us. Are you going to wait till deadline on Thursday night to make that pick? What do you say?
I kind of want to. I'm kind of like Jenni. I think I'd give Baylor just a slight edge. I don't think they're going to rattle Dylan Gabriel like they did Baron Morton. I mean, he's a veteran.
Right.
He looked severely rattled in that game with Baylor's pass rush, threw some really bad passes into coverage. But OU doesn't really get a very big pass rush. And I think Shapen's probably going to have some time to throw. I think Richard Reese has proven he can run on anybody. I think Baylor's O-line's getting better. They're probably playing at the level most people thought they would now. But then again, they are 1-14 in Norman. And I know they played some really good teams. But I'm going to take Baylor, like Jenni, kind of like by a few points.
Certainly, I feel like Baylor is trending in the right direction. These last couple games, they seem like they've started to figure some things out. But Oklahoma's won its last two games too. And they seem like certainly offensively are coming around. And then I guess who'd they play this last game? They played pretty good defense in that one.
Yeah, at Iowa State. And their defense for the first time really all year kind of played the hero at the end, get the interception to seal it away. Not a game that they won by it wasn't 42-41 type of thing. They actually were able to hold Iowa State in check. Iowa State, not a great offense, but a really good defense. So, for OU's defense to stand up, and they won the turnover margin, that was big. Did some really nice things defensively. But what you said is right, Brice. They're not going to get a huge pass rush, I don't think. So if Blake Shapen and the run game for Baylor can take advantage of that, that's definitely I think the game turns on those lines of scrimmage. OU's offensive line has been good. Maybe one of their strongest strengths of the year, which we didn't know if that was going to be the case or not, but they've gotten really nice play out of their offensive line. But that Baylor defensive line can be a whole other animal if it gets going. So how does OU's offensive line handle that side of Baylor's defense? And then on the flip side, can that OU defensive front, can they get some pressure? Can they, blitz a little bit, get some linebackers, safeties involved, maybe rattle some cages? But that to me is going to be it's a big inflection point in this game in my mind.
Yeah. So Jenni, I went to a million years ago. I went to Oklahoma Baptist University in Shawnee.
Sure.
Yeah. And so I was surrounded by Sooner fans, and I still have a bunch of Sooner fan friends. The one thing that I know they agree on is that Lincoln Riley is like public enemy number one.
Oh yes, that has not changed.
He's right up there with Kevin Durant. But you cover this team all the time. I mean, what's kind of the general feeling among Sooner fans about, this season? And are they still, behind Brett Venables? Obviously, it hasn't gone the way they wanted.
No, not at all. I think that obviously Brent Venables was a very popular hire when Joe Castiglione pulled the trigger after Lincoln Riley left. Obviously a known commodity around here, and had such great success at Clemson over the last decade. Really probably you could say the best defensive coordinator in all of college football, really, over that decade. So I think a lot of really high hopes that he would just come in and pick up where the program was and then improve what else needed to be improved. But the transfer portal hit OU probably harder than a lot of people wanted to admit. They lost a decent amount when Lincoln Riley left, and they lost a decent amount to the NFL. I mean, they lost 5 defenders who were taken in the NFL draft. So they just by that measure, they were going to have some talent to replace. So, and truthfully, if you go and look at all Big 12 teams, the Big 12 team at the end of last year and the preseason Big 12 team this year, Oklahoma just didn't have many guys represented. And there weren't a ton of guys you could point to and say, man, that guy should have been on there over this guy. Their punter was a first team, a preseason pick. But, Marvin Mims, the receiver, is really good. But could you replace any of the receivers that were first team? No. I mean, there's just a bunch of those examples. So the talent is not what the talent has been. And it has been going steadily downhill over the last few years. I think Brent Venables in this group is seeing the unfortunate fruits of that. Plus, they're also really, they brought in a new offense with Jeff Lebby. They brought in a defense, obviously, with Brent, and installing those two offense and defense, and then getting the players that they want to run it. It's just like they've got personnel that were brought in to run different stuff. So in reality, it was going to take some time, but I think the expectation was, last time OU made a coaching change, it went from good to great. And, by God, Brent Venables coming back, it's all going to be fantastic. And I think the reality, it was never probably going to be as good, but it was hard not to think, well, Oklahoma just keeps being Oklahoma. But I think a lot of people in the fan base obviously want better, but I think there's also an understanding that in whatever amount of time, Oklahoma is going to go to the SEC. And Brent Venables knows how to beat SEC teams because he did it at Clemson. And so having a team with a defense that can compete in the SEC is very important. So I think there is that grinding in a lot of OU fans' heads, like, oh, 3 losses. This is terrible. But then there's the recognition of like, okay, if this team is better prepared for the SEC in a couple years after this and the next few years, then I think that'll be a lot easier pill to swallow.
Yeah, good points. So let's talk about that other Oklahoma team. Yeah.
Don't ask me to explain what I saw last Saturday. That's all I ask.
I mean, I was just stunned. It was really stunning. And Mike Gundy was very candid about his assessment of the game. Yeah. Had to put in some bleeps, you know. Yeah, K-State just trampled Oklahoma State. What was it, 48-0? Is that the score?
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, I was stunned. Not that K-State won, but because I did pick Oklahoma State, but just how lopsided it was. I don't, like Jenni said, this league has been parity filled this year. So where does Oklahoma State go from here? And do you guys think that they could get it together and potentially get back to Jerry World? John?
I'm going to say the odds are against them to get back. Looking at K-State's schedule here, they've got a home game against Texas, and then they go to Baylor, to West Virginia, and close at home against Kansas. I think they could win all 4 of those games. I think 3-1's a very likely scenario. And yeah, I just think they've got the edge there. Yeah, but you know, obviously Oklahoma State still has to play Oklahoma, and they've got some winnable games here: Kansas, Iowa State, West Virginia. I mean, those are winnable, and but they would have to have TCU or K-State really stumble a little bit for them to get back.
Yeah, I think that the head-to-head tiebreakers that Oklahoma State doesn't have, you know, with losing to TCU, losing to K-State, they're going to need help. You know, they're going to need help from some other teams, and not to say it couldn't happen, because you know, I think there are some, you know, just because of the way the league has gone, you could see some teams beating those 2 teams. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility, but I do think it's going to require help for Oklahoma State. And it's also, I think there's a big question mark this week heading into that game at Kansas is quarterback health. Spencer Sanders has been dealing with questions about his shoulder basically since the TCU game, but he's played through it. He's very tough guy. So he's handled a lot of pain, I think. But last week at K-State, when we saw him leave that game, ultimately, he was showing as much pain visibly with his shoulder as I think we've maybe ever seen him show in a game when he was hurt. So is he available? I'm sure they're doing everything in their power to get him ready to go. He'll probably want to be out there, even if they have to duct tape his arm, you know, into place. I mean, but I just don't know. I don't know what his level of you know, health is and how effective he's going to be. I think I saw something the K-State defensive coordinator said today that, you know, they'll be the same offense regardless of who their quarterback is. Well, if you're playing a 4th-year starter or a walk-on who's never started before, I'm not sure I believe that. So that Spencer Sanders is one of the best quarterbacks in the conference, and so to not have him would be a huge thing. And you know, obviously, any loss at this point would almost for sure knock the Cowboys out of that Big 12 conference title game conversation.
Yeah, they have very little margin for error for sure. Whereas, you know, somebody like TCU has all the margin, you know, going undefeated thus far. I still think a fall is coming for the Frogs, and it's probably that game at Texas where Gary Patterson will scheme up something for his old team, you know.
It's a great point.
Yeah. So let's dig into this K-State team a little bit more. So here on our podcast, we've given a lot of credit this year to Sonny Dykes at TCU. I mean, that's been an incredible story. You know, we talked last week a lot about Joey McGuire and sort of the fit there in Lubbock. I feel like that guy fits West Texas. And then Lance Leipold and the Jayhawks, to me, even, you know, with this recent kind of losing streak, are still the story of the Big 12. But we probably haven't talked enough, and that's my fault, about K-State and chris-Klieman. So Wildcats are second in the Big 12, right behind TCU, 4-1 in the conference. Really good shape to make the Big 12 championship game. It would be their first appearance since 2003. And we're all old enough to remember that, but So what impresses you guys about this team? And is Klieman kind of like, maybe Joey McGuire at Tech or whoever? Is he like that perfect fit in Manhattan?
Hey, first off, I'll give you guys a little pass for not maybe talking as much about K-State, because when they lost that game to Tulane, I think it really took the air out of that team, and lose that game to Tulane at home.
Mm-hmm.
And then, even if they went after they went to OU and won, I think a lot of people said, maybe that's an aberration. So, and then I think a lot of people started talking about these other teams, OSU starts to rise, TCU's obviously winning, OU falling. There's just a lot of oxygen going to other teams, but pretty clearly K-State has righted the ship from that Tulane game. I think they win in a lot of the same ways with this team as they have with they did with a lot of the Bill Snyder teams. They don't beat themselves. They don't do dumb stuff very often. And they've got offensive and defensive lines that know what they're doing and they can be effective. So I do think it's a good fit, Klieman and K-State. The one thing that's interesting to me about Chris-Klieman is, when he comes in with this pedigree of being this great offensive mind. He's developed quarterbacks at, the lower levels at the FCS level. They're gonna play K-State, tough nose, hard nose, defense, offense, but they're gonna add in all this offensive flair with Chris-Klieman. And that hasn't happened. So I keep thinking, I really thought Adrian Martinez would be that guy this year. He's kind of been where I think they want to get, but not to that level yet. So I'm curious to see if, in the next couple of years, if maybe Klieman can get one of those types of quarterbacks, what next steps he could take at K-State, because pretty clearly he is the type of guy that really resonates with that program and with that fan base.
Mm-hmm. John, what do you say?
Yeah, like Jenni said, this is looking more like a Bill Snyder kind of team, playing really solid defense, obviously extremely good defense last week. But yeah, they're one of the top defensive teams in the league. They got a really great centerpiece player in Deuce Vaughn. And, Will Howard has stepped in and done a great job at quarterback after Martinez got hurt. He was Big 12 Offensive Player of the Week this week. So they look really solid to me. And like Jenni said, who would have thought after that Tulane game? I was ready to kind of write them off. Had he lose to Tulane at home and then have a good year? But man, they've bounced back pretty big. And they're a very good team. It's
a head-scratching year in the Big 12. Can't figure out any of these teams, but hasn't Deuce Vaughn been there about 10 years? I mean, it feels like it,
All right, yeah.
He's been there a while.
Wasn't he supposed to be done with Brice Hall? Deuce and Brice, weren't they supposed to go out together? Why is he still there?
Yeah.
Well, and I'm gonna break one of my own rules, and it's supposed to be what's said in the press box stays in the press box. But last week in Lubbock, somebody said something about Deuce Vaughn being there forever, and I said, well, after this year, they'll be able to drop a deuce. This is the kind of junior high humor you get on our podcast, Jenni.
Oh no.
Oh gosh. So it is Halloween week. Yesterday, as we record our podcast, was Halloween. And I'm interested to get y'all's thoughts on this. This is the Super Bowl of candy holidays. Kids just go on an absolute sugar bender. At our house, we had what I would call the trash candy. Walmart was kind of sold out. And so we had like the lollipops and the Smarties and that stuff. I mean, you could see the kids looking down like, oh man, this is what I got. But for you guys, when you're indulging, what's the go-to candy prize? What do you really want?
Ooh. I was over at some friend's house. We, did the kids walking around, but then did the candy handing outing. And I got talking to one of the other adults, and we were talking about Rolos. When I was a kid, I had Rolos, and I thought these are pretty good. But then in my adulthood, I kind of let them go. but man, those little guys are outstanding.
Yeah.
So I'm back on the Rolo bandwagon, but I also, hey, Butterfingers and those are fantastic, and you can't beat a Reese's peanut butter cup.
I mean, to me, that's the MVP. I agree with you. Yeah, that's the gold standard. John, what do you say?
Well, this is pretty high level trick or treat. You probably like maybe one house and like in the town might have it. Caramel apple.
Oh, that's really
with some nuts on it.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody ever hands those out anymore, but like when I was a kid, if you went to the right house or you knew somebody that regularly handed those out, that was your go-to house.
You're so health conscious, John. I mean,
I got one in my fridge right now.
This is your cheat day. No, I'm with Jenny. I mean, chocolate and peanut butter is a hard combo to mess up. I agree that chocolate and caramel is pretty dadgum good too, but yeah, I mean, I always love a Reese's. That's good stuff. Jenny, I did want to ask you one other thing. I'm kind of going off book here. So earlier on our podcast a couple of weeks ago, we had Blair Kirchhoff as our special guest, which completed I don't know that we were shooting for this, but we have had in the past, we have had you on the podcast. We've had Max Olson on the podcast. We've had Joseph Duarte, and Blair sort of completed the foursome, the Mount Rushmore, and what I'm calling the panel, the media panel that has joined this new Big 12 show. I asked Blair about it. What's that been like? And do they give you guys carte blanche to kind of talk about whatever you want to talk about?
Yeah, we got asked, the four of us got asked before this season if we'd hop on a weekly panel to talk about goings on in the Big 12, and it's been a lot of fun. It's a lot of game talk, but also, there's been no shortage of off the field stuff too. Whether it's this new media rights deal or obviously the new commissioner. Now we're starting to, this is partially on the field, but now kind of trying to guess what's the college football playoff committee going to do? How are they going to look at Big 12 teams as it, relates to rankings now that those are coming out? So it has been fun. There's never any shortage of stuff to talk about. I really have enjoyed that. And it's definitely been fun. And, the fact that we're getting it from very different perspectives, Blair in Kansas City, Joseph in Houston, obviously coming in with UH next year into the Big 12. And then Max from more of a holistic sort of view. He covers a little bit of everything. It's been fun. It's been good. And this week, the last couple weeks, I've done it from my car, which hasn't been the most outstanding thing, but sometimes, we're journalists. We got to do stuff like that.
Got to roll with it.
Yeah, but I'm back in the home office this week, so I feel good about that.
Yeah. So check that out, people. On ESPN Plus is where you can find it. So pretty cool. I think Blair, what he said was this is only about 20-25 years, overdue. I mean, and so I thought hopefully it's something that the Big 12, will continue. Very cool. Very cool. So, Jenny, will you be in Norman or will you be Saturday?
I'm actually headed north with Oklahoma State to see their game at Kansas. So I am on the OSU 2:30 train right now. So they have had 7 consecutive 2:30 games.
That's amazing.
Whoa.
That's amazing.
It's crazy. It's totally insane. So
You're living right, Jenny.
I mean, I don't know what that is. I don't love 2:30 kickoffs on the road. I don't really care that much because I'm on the road, but at home, I'd prefer 11 and 7, just so you don't have your whole day completely, obliterated by your game. But 2:30 it is. I'll be there in Lawrence on Saturday.
Yeah, at least it's deadline friendly. That's what we like.
It's all about us.
Yes.
Really comes back to it's all about us.
Yes. Just like when we go on a road trip, we basically plan where we're going to eat. I mean, that's the whole thing, So,
yeah.
Priorities.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for hopping on and talking stuff with us. And I'm sure we'll see you down the road and enjoy your trip.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks,
Thanks,
Jenny.
Jenny.
All right.
Bye.